Hello, everybody. Um, F&M students. I wanted to give you a little bit of guidance now to your Mod 6 memo. Um, so this is sort of the COVID edition of this. Okay, so um, you're being asked to provide a forecast of just really basically three variables. Um, what will real GDP or the percentage change in real GDP, what will that be? What will the unemployment rate be? And what will the inflation rate be? And so I'm giving you the values here for the average for 2019. And what we want you to do is we want you to give a forecast for 2020, okay, under these extraordinary circumstances. And now, the idea is that there has to be a kind of consistency between these forecasts in the sense that you have to be anchoring and keeping everything together with some key relationships. The two key relationships we're asking you to use are what we call Okun's law and the Phillips curve. And I'm going to show you this. Okay, so you'll remember the Phillips curve. If not, you can go back into MANCU 412 to 416. Inflation, the idea is that the rate of growth of CPI in any period is equal to what we expect that rate of growth to be, plus some uh, function of cyclical unemployment. Now, you should know that when the unemployment rate goes up, you have less wage pressures, less cost pressures, and prices go down. So this coefficient beta should actually be negative. And then you would want to think about a supply shock. Okay, we'll discuss that in a second. It's some exogenous factor that might push prices up and down above and beyond cyclical unemployment. So, okay, as you know, um, uh, in these extraordinary times, we already have some estimates of what unemployment is or what it will be. And I would advise you, you can go and do a little bit of um, investigation. For example, the St. Louis Fed has come up with a number. Okay, you can Google St. Louis Fed unemployment estimate. Plus, okay, when we talk about the supply shock, okay, now the thing is in your instructions, it says, well, just assume this to be 0.5%. Now, I want to mention in this case, when something bad happens, okay, let's say that you have a disruption to the harvest. Uh, let's say, for example, you know that some meat packing uh, um, installations in parts of the country have been closing down, or also that some product of the harvest, some vegetables, there isn't anybody to harvest it, so the stuff is being thrown away. And then, of course, if it's not food, then it's toilet paper. People are trying to sell toilet paper online for higher prices. All of these are bad supply shocks that could be pushing the inflation rate up. Now, in your instructions, it says 0.5%, but actually, we want to relax that assumption. You want to put a number that you think is reasonable, and I'll show you that in a second. Now let's go on to Okun's law. And as you know, I'll just very briefly go over it, that this is a linkage between unemployment and GDP growth. So the idea is that if you have no change in unemployment, you will get um, real GDP growth equal to the long run GDP growth. But if unemployment goes up, that means that you're producing less. That's going to bring GDP growth down. This is what Okun's law is, and there's a nice chart of that in Mankiw's textbook and also in my textbook. So if you want to put all of these together and you kind of want to see how things fit, I provided you with a little spreadsheet and I posted that. But the idea is that um, okay, what you want to do is you want to calculate. For example, you might start off with your projection of 8% inflation, unemployment. I'm sorry, and then using other assumptions, and you are free to modify these assumptions here. For example, I put expected inflation equal to the inflation rate in last period, um, and then I put the natural rate of unemployment, that's U star. I've estimated that just to be 3.7%, but you might find a different number for that. And then the supply shock, I started off with the suggested number, and what do we get? We get an inflation rate of minus 1.5%. And you might say, well, gee, that's a little bit low. I think that actually the food supply is going to be more of a factor here. So you might want to change that, okay? Then the idea is bringing in Okun's law. So, okay, you've made your projection for unemployment. That will have an implication via Okun's law on growth. Okay, and the equations in here, you may not be exactly happy with these numbers, so you can feel free to modify them. And the other thing that I want to mention here is that, okay, if you can start off with um, with a real GDP growth, you think that GDP growth, let's say, is going to go down by -3 instead of -6 here. Okay, that's fine. Okay, okay. Then you can take the -3 and you could subtract off the 3. So it's going to be -6, and you can solve out here for the change in unemployment. So basically, you can flip the Okun's law equation. Okay, if you have much stronger beliefs on what GDP growth will be as opposed to unemployment. So the last thing that I want to say here, okay, the last part talks about what should the monetary policy be for the Federal Open Market Committee, and it does talk about interest rates. This is kind of appropriate for maybe normal times, but really interest rates right now are very, very low. So I would ask you also to consider what we call the issue of quantitative easing. You can go back and read that 94 to 96 in Mankiw. And then the idea, you can look at I showed you during the sync session what the trends were, or what the recent developments were for the Fed's balance sheet. Okay, and here is the link for that. And there's another discussion. There are many discussions of Fed policy. Okay, so the idea is you can modify this and you can incorporate something a little bit more topical. Should the Fed continue to expand base money, or should it contract it, or should it leave it unchanged, and why? So instead of just talking about interest rates, you can also talk about the quantitative aspect, what we call quantitative easing. So I hope that this is a help for your Mod 6 memo. You know how you can reach me through the Q&A board and also through email. I hope everybody's staying safe. Thank you very much.